Good afternoon and welcome to this podcast with me, brother Ilo SJ, as well as father is a Jesuit from US. To know more about him, I asked him to introduce a bit about yourself and your work in mission.
Great, thank you very much, Ilo. So my name is Christopher Staab. I am a Jesuit from the Midwest province of the United States, and I was born in Cleveland, Ohio. And in Cleveland, I went to a school that was run by the Jesuits, and that's how I found out about the Society of Jesus. And sometime later, I entered the society, and then from that time, I've been through Jesuit formation in different parts of the world. I was in Lima, Peru. I was also in Chicago, United States, and then I did my studies in Brazil, and then also in Spain. And then once I finished my studies, which I did my studies in Ignatian spirituality, I was first missioned to Rome, and then now I am in California, where I teach in the area of Ignatian spirituality, or Christian spirituality, at a school of theology near San Francisco. It's in Berkeley, California.
Well, Father, thank you very much. Talking about Ignatius' life, and I want you to explore how Saint Ignatius' life inspires us today amidst this tension of fast pace, amidst the tension of distractions, and especially the young people nowadays. There are a lot of expectation from the family and parents, and especially themselves also. So how Saint Ignatius' life inspires us today in a world of rapid changes?
Oh, that's a great question, Elo. So one of the things that I think is really interesting about Ignatius is that he is a person that was really searching for quite a long time for his life, or for meaning in his life, or for what we might say, what was God's will in his life. Another way of putting that is he spent a lot of time looking for like a life of happiness or fulfillment. And it wasn't easy for him. So in that sense, I think he's a figure that connects with a lot of young people, because he was, maybe the pace of his life wasn't fast, but there was lots of struggles and tensions, and he thought, for example, that Jerusalem was the place that he was supposed to live and work, and then he goes there and he is told that he has to return home. So he had to really take time to figure things out. So one of the lessons of his life story is to keep journeying. Like to, I know that struggles are so hard for all of us, but like his story is like, well, it's worth the struggle, because at some point, trusting in God and looking at Ignatius' life, we're going to find something which is more fulfilling. We're going to find something which brings us happiness. And that's really a beautiful part of the story. So perhaps the pace of his life is different from ours, but even in the pace of our life, it is possible to find that place, and it is worth the struggle.
Well, Father, Saint Ignatius experienced a profound conversation after his injury. So how can moment of crisis in our lives becomes an opportunities from transformation today?
It's a good question, because he also was a person, like many people today, that had a crisis that was both a physical crisis. He was hit by a cannonball, but also probably a moral crisis or a spiritual crisis. And then also, when this happened to him, he's about 30 years old, didn't have a family, didn't really have much direction in his life. But one of the things that he did was he took time to really look at his life. And I think that's a great lesson for us. Like, some things happen to us, and they might, even though this is difficult to do, it's very easy to say, some of these moments can allow us to take a look back and see, well, kind of where are we going? And what do we want in our life? And that's what he did when he was convalescing in Loyola. He took a moment to stop and examine and to see what was in his heart. So the crises can be moments, and I know that it's very hard to do, but they can be moments in which we finally stop and we finally look at ourselves in our hearts and like, well, what is it that I want? What is important to me? Where am I going? Is this the life that I want to live? And that's what he did. And maybe he had to have the crisis to ask those questions. If he didn't have the crisis, perhaps he would have never asked those certain questions and never took the path that he did. So it's not like anybody is looking to have a crisis. But when it happens, if we look to his life and we can learn anything from it, perhaps we can say, okay, now what?
So, Father, since you mentioned about moral crisis and then spiritual crisis,
Yeah.
how is it like for Saint Ignatius then, and connect to this nowadays, Australian people?
Good. I think by the spiritual crisis, he was probably wondering where was God. Like, where is God in this? In this injury where I am recuperating, and what does this say about my relationship with God? Now, for the moral crisis, he's probably perhaps, I don't really know, but one of the things that we might imagine is thinking that the injury to his leg was something of a punishment. And so that would be a strong moral crisis, to interpret the kind of the awful situation that he was in as a kind of punishment. It wasn't a punishment. This is something that happened to him. So he had to learn how to reread morally and spiritually his life, and to discover that the wound wasn't a punishment. The wound was something that happened that he got himself into. So the capacity to reinterpret his life, to imagine a different kind of understanding of his life with God, that the bad situation wasn't a punishment, or that the bad situation didn't necessarily mean distance from God.
So, Father, from Saint Ignatius' experience of struggling in moral and spiritual crisis, so he experienced all those things, and also about this proud to become a healthy, wealthy person. And after all this, would you say that finding God in all things, which is much like not only in the good times but also in the bad times, in crisis, you say that, Father?
I think so, but also it's important to say that that takes time. So one of the things that we have to be careful of is the number of times we say, oh, finding God in all things, finding God in all things. Well, that's nice to say, but in fact, that is the fruit of a long life of struggle and discernment and prayer and making a mistake or failing, experiencing joy. So that comes with time, and it comes with looking at our past, because often in the particular experiences that I'm in or that you're in, sometimes, well, it's hard to know that God is there, but in a life in which we kind of grow into that, or lean into that, or move into that, it doesn't happen automatically. And so it's important to recall that we affirm that God is in all things, but sometimes it's only looking back that we see that, oh, God was there. I didn't know that. And also it's important to say that for us now, and this is different from Ignatius of Loyola, we have other people that can help us. You know, Ignatius did this journey largely on his own for many, many years, and then he found companions, and the companions helped him. So friendship too is a part of that finding God in all things, and finding our way, both spiritually and morally.
So finding God in all things is not simply say easy way that this is how I find God, but it comes along of times of processing and then discernment of his spirit as well. Obviously, St. Ignatius, like, I have to focus on your desires, feelings, and emotions. So I want you to explain a bit about the discernment of St. Ignatius.
So, for example, in his very beautiful example of his discernment, while he was convalescing in Loyola, he had two different ideas. One idea was to marry a woman of some nobility, and he was very interested in that. Another idea that he had was to imitate St. Francis and St. Dominic and live a life of real Christian zeal, and to be an apostle like they were, following Jesus. So he has these two different ideas, and he discovers that when he's thinking about becoming married and giving his life over to this woman, at first he feels good about it, but then the thought leaves him dry. He's not very happy with it, doesn't feel totally content. Whereas on the other hand, when he's thinking about imitating the saints and living a life of really radical kind of Christian discipleship, he feels good about it, and the good feeling stays with him. So he's able to make the distinction between how one thought brought him good feelings, and those feelings stayed with him. And how the other thought brought him feelings that were good, but those feelings changed. So discernment is attending to the way our feelings move us in a certain direction and stay with us in that direction towards something that we're seeking.
So Father, discernment, because discernment is not only personal discernment, but also communal discernment and discernment also with God, because we have to rely on God, because our discernment is not only come from our own decisions, but also from the primarily is from God. So how can one make a discernment well in the communal discernment and also with God?
Perhaps one of the ways to make a good communal discernment is to imagine that when a community is discerning, or whether an individual is discerning, they're trying to find where God is in their life and to follow that God. The God that is a God of life, the God of service, a God of solidarity, a God of maybe greater commitment. And so what it does require is a certain amount of time to see, well, where are the movements, we would say, or the desires leading the person towards, where the desires lead the person towards maybe greater joy or greater peace or greater serenity, and following those. Now, on an individual level, sometimes that's hard to do, to find those interior movements that bring one peace. But that's what we have to do, or try to do anyway. And for a community that's discerning, to find out, well, what is God calling us to do? What is God asking us to do? The community tries to do that together to find out, well, where are they feeling that kind of greater peace and joy as they make a decision about one thing or another.
So would you say that discernment, even in a personal level, on secondary or tertiary level, how is it like connect to principle and foundation, St. Ignatius?
Okay. So the principle and foundation refers to a paragraph in the exercises which states that the human person is created to praise, reverence, and serve God, and that everything has been created on this earth for this person, and this person has been made for this relationship, and the person has been made for a relationship and is endowed with a certain freedom, and can use that freedom to make choices which help him or her in that relationship. So discernment is very much connected to that, because it's a relational thing. So if I'm discerning something out of and in a relationship with God, or with a community and God, or with a spouse and God. And so because we are made for relationship, discernment is a way for us to grow in relationship.
So Father, how can Ignatian discernment really help young people today to make a meaningful decision about their future and vocation? Because it seems like young people today, they don't know where to go, so they just follow the crowd. So, and discernment for them is very hard, because they don't want to accept the reality sometimes. What I cannot do, but I just want to follow others. So how can
one of the starting points is to imagine, or to help a young person discover that he or she has been made for a relationship with God, and that God desires a relationship with that person, a relationship that is special and beautiful and life-giving. And so if we help young people understand that they have been made to be in deep relationship with God and with others, that could be helpful, right? And I think my sense is that young people in our time, and I don't know about young people in Ignatius of Loyola's time, but there's a sense in which we're all looking for intimacy. We're all looking for closeness. We're all looking to be loved. We're all looking for relationships that are meaningful and healthy. And so discernment is based upon the idea that God made the person, God seeks the person, God will always seek the person, and that we can respond. And discernment is a way for us to try to respond to that kind of intimacy, that which we were really longing for, we really want. Now, it doesn't make it easy, and we have to make choices, because some relationships in our lives are helpful, other relationships in our lives are less helpful. So discernment is about finding those relationships which are helpful to us, which we like, which are good, and following them, and trying to say no to those relationships and those patterns that don't help us.
But would you say that discernment, to discern well or to decide well, it also relates to interior freedom?
It does, but we don't have to be. We're all as free as we can be in this particular moment. So there's no. We come as we are, and so we discern the best that we can with what we have and how we are and the limitations that we have, and so hopefully in our life, with the decisions that we make, we grow with some freedom or some acceptance of who we are, and we ask for God to help us to do that. And also, I think it's just really important to underline that relationships for you and me, relationships for young people, are really important, and it's important to discern relationships that are helpful, and help us grow in freedom, to accept ourselves, to love ourselves, to see that we're good people. We have our struggles, but we're good, and the freedom to say yes to who we are. That's really important.
But then maybe this is the last question. Especially nowadays, some people, because I talk to many people, and they talk to me also. They share with me about their experience, why they don't want to go to the church because they feel judged, or they feel that they have commit mistake or sin against others, against God, so they don't want to go to the church. And so, in relation to Saint Ignatius' life, what message do you want to say to the people, those who might think of themselves as a sinner or commit mistakes and then want to approach God because of this dirt, they feel the dirt is on themselves?
I think Ignatius would probably have felt a lot like that in his life. He probably felt that he didn't deserve things. He really had a big ego, selfish, made a lot of mistakes. But he discovered that God was merciful, and that he was forgiven, and that we don't have to earn God's love, but that God loves us no matter what we've done. So, mercy is at the heart of who God is, and I think Ignatius really experienced that, because he had every reason to believe that God didn't love him, or they didn't deserve it, or he really made a lot of mistakes. So I think he reminds us that God is merciful. And sometimes going to church is hard because we don't feel the mercy. But if we think about Ignatius' life, we can recall, yes, it's true. God is merciful.
So thank you very much, Father, for this fruitful conversation, a simple conversation, but it's really helped me help others to know ourselves, especially to know Saint Ignatius' life is really much important nowadays, because sometimes I judge myself also as well, and looking at the Saint Ignatius' life, it really gives me a conversion, that even I am a sinner, if I commit mistake, yes I do, but as you mentioned, God is merciful, God is compassion, He is there to forgive us. So thank you very much for your time, your wisdom, and share with me this podcast. So thank you very much, and thank you, Father.
Thank you, Elo.
Thank you.
Thank you.